Hey YouTube, I got a product review for you. I don't do these quite often, but this is a really interesting product. It's super small and it shoots stabilized video, and it's not this Mavic Mini. It's actually in my pocket. It's the Insta360 Go. I call it the Insta180 because it's not actually a 360 camera. And this is not the camera. This is a case and the communications port, but the camera is this one. It's 180, it's got one sensor, one lens, and it shoots what ends up being a 1080 video. So let's see if it's worth shelling out over $250 for this tiny little thing.
The Insta360 Go is about as much of a 360 camera as the new Porsche Taycan can be called turbo. I prefer to call it a 180 camera because it features a single lens covering 180-degree angle in both axes and allows a cropped 16:9 image of 1080p resolution. The large surface area of around 3000 by 3000 pixels is used to get a stabilized footage, as the tiny 19-gram camera also features a gyro, and all the data is processed after the fact in a mobile app, or if you're old-fashioned, a Windows or macOS program to result in a smooth, stabilized 1080p footage. Because initially the camera was aimed at the Instagram youth, it comes with all sorts of accessories. An old man like me would not even begin to understand what they're for, but surprisingly nothing kinky was in the box. The camera has a nice party trick up its sleeve in the form of a neck lanyard that has the power of magnets enclosed in it. You just slip it under your shirt and the camera magically holds to it like Tom Cruise on a plane taking off in Mission Impossible. There's quite a few of these mounts, and while they aren't as satisfying as the neck strap, they all seem useful enough to get the camera into a nice angle. So how is the camera for someone solely ground-based? I've brought the camera with me on a few walks, or given the circumstances outside now, I can boldly call them trips, and the results are fairly disappointing. Everything about capturing, managing the footage and editing is great. It's out of your way, the cradle works as a great storage case while it's in your pocket, although the lightning connector is sticking out considerably. The case charges the camera, but my experience with the battery life doesn't quite add up to the numbers Insta360 claims. I've drained the camera in minutes. Luckily, you can just hook it to a regular power bank with a micro USB cable. So workflow wise, it's great, but in terms of the output quality, it's quite a disappointment. The camera only outputs 25 frames a second, and the final videos have the bitrate of 30 megabits. The negative, the source 3000 by 3000 images, have a higher bitrate of 40 megabits. At least that's what the spec sheet says. Not sure if it's the bitrate or simply the grain of sand size of the sensor. The footage just looks mushy unless you shoot in total bright sunlight. But then you're hit by the 25 frames per second speed, as faster shutter speeds turns your footage into a choppy action scene in a Guy Ritchie movie, but without all the lovely action. I'm not going to repeat all the other reviews that you can view on YouTube in terms of what the camera does, what kind of modes and everything, but I do want to point out a nice feature, and that's the force feedback doohickey inside the camera. Even though it's only 19 grams, they still decided to put that extra weight in for great usability. It kind of felt like using the GoPro Session. I didn't have to guess whether I'm recording or what mode I'm recording in, because the camera nicely lets you know with vibrations. Once you set everything up in the app, the camera behaves perfectly deterministically. So the hyperlapses are great if you're driving a car or ride a bicycle, but they fall apart when walking. And I don't mean in terms of the actual picture quality, but also the stabilization, which is the main selling point of this camera. The square Instagram format has the best stabilization, but even that isn't 100% stable. So can the camera redeem itself in the FPV mode? The tiny camera actually makes sense once you put it up in the air. But it's not the first one that targets the small size. There's been plenty of cameras for the RC market that were small enough to be flown by 2-inch or 3-inch quads. Particularly or worth mentioning is the Runcam Split series. That was just a bare board camera that was meant to be built into a drone. There's been plenty more, but all of them were kind of poor quality. But if you're looking at the non-stabilized version of what comes out of this camera, it's not much better. In fact, I would say that the aperture stepping actually makes it worse than what the cheap Chinese cameras were capable of. So there's a big community growing around stripping down full-size GoPros, particularly the Hero 6, and building these quotes naked around 20-gram cameras that you build into tiny whoop size micros. This is mainly driven by the amazing Reelsteady Go stabilization software. That is, on one hand, it's processing and labor intensive, but the results are just, out of this world. One of my most popular videos on this channel is from a 2-inch build that had just a full-size GoPro Session, and it's stabilized with Reelsteady Go. So can you get, close enough with the Insta360 Go to this kind of footage? You would have to really squint your eyes, and unless you're viewing or unless your main platform is Instagram or Facebook, then I would say no. The stabilization is indeed bringing a lot to the table compared to just these cheap Chinese cameras, but it still isn't great when you're viewing it on a big size monitor. If you want the absolute best quality from your tiny drone, then a naked GoPro is a way to go. But that process to strip it out of its casing is not really very straightforward, and only the bravest of the brave can actually end up with a functioning camera. Buying an Insta360 Go and taping it onto anything, that's really easy. So the barrier to entry is definitely the lowest for the white pill camera. So do I regret buying this little thing? Not at all. It's actually very enjoyable to put it just about anywhere and get like new angles, and the workflow is not painful at all. So it's definitely better to have a 1080p stabilized footage out of your 3-inch or 2-inch than say the DVR from the HD goggles. Would I recommend you to shell out $250 and buy the Insta360 Go? Then the answer is a resolute no. For that kind of money, you can get the Hero 6 for like $180 these days. And yes, you can't just stick it onto a 3-inch. Well, maybe 3-inch would deal with it, but like a 2-inch. But having the naked stripped down GoPro is definitely something that I will personally be trying, because the footage out of Reelsteady Go is the most stable and beautiful, ortholinear with added motion blur. It just looks the best out of any action camera that you can get these days.